Good morning again, everyone. Before I get started, I want to send a special shout out to my friends from Blue Haven, Philly. Thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate your support. So, first I want to say to those who know me fairly well, I have no idea how to end up here either. Some of you know that I can be loud on the internet, but I'm usually more reserved in person. Nonetheless, I thought this subject was important enough that I would stretch my comfort zone a bit and present it to you all. Sure. Maybe let me move myself closer. All right. Thank you. For those who don't know me, here's a quick bio about myself and the journey that brought me to you all today. I've been involved with the UU faith for just over 5 years. So I guess that puts me in graduate school or 5th grade, one. First 2 years were in Dallas, where I discovered the First Unitarian Church of Dallas and pursued a spiritual journey that I intended to take with my late wife, Kathy. It was at this point that I realized back home that the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia was not merely the cool Christian church that held punk rock concerts in the basement. I mean, it's still cool, but for a lot of other reasons. I came to check out this First U when I came home to visit and decided to make it my home church upon getting settled almost 3 years ago. I knew enough about UU before I went to my first service in Dallas that I was not surprised to not see a high percentage of Black or other congregants of color. That is not to say I wasn't treated well by members. In fact, in many ways, they helped save my life. But in private, some members of color expressed their concerns to me that despite well-meaning intentions and gestures, they did not feel their concerns, interests, and traditions were as embraced as well as they could have been. As someone who has spent much of his professional and personal life in majority white spaces, it's not something I caught on to right away, but eventually I did start to notice some things. I had the feeling that this was not limited to just one congregation. That was confirmed when I discovered the existence of two organizations, BLUE, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, and DRUM, Diverse and Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries. I figured that there was a reason that these networks existed. As it turns out, both BLUE and DRUM have parallel goals that include offering an affirming worship space, working towards a more inclusive UU community, and trying to end racism in the nation and the world at large. Now, you might say in response, isn't this what Unitarian Universalism is already about, or should be about? It's a good question. If those are indeed goals that UU congregations are striving towards, that is not so clear to many UUs of color that enough focus has been devoted or progress has been made. Continuing on this journey, last year I was invited by our own Kiro Polson to join a discussion group called Widening the Circle, based on the Widening the Circle of Concern, a report released by the Unitarian Universalist Association, or UUA, in June 2020, which focused mostly on institutional change to support members and congregants of color, while also acknowledging some intersectional concerns with the queer community. As a quick aside, I'll say that while our congregation is fortunate and perhaps unique in having two queer faith leaders in Reverend Abby and Reverend Hannah, I would imagine that there are some in the community themselves who may feel there is also room for improvement in addressing their own concerns, interests, and traditions. But that's a topic for another day and another person. The genesis of Widening the Circle report was a meeting in June 2017 by 3 co-presidents, including one, Reverend Sophia Betancourt, that name probably sounds familiar, who acquired their chair positions after the previous president vacated the role due to racial concerns connected to hiring. That's a hard thing to admit, huh? I've listened to the audio recording of the report and read the transcript, which details not only anonymous accounts of situations experienced by congregants of color, but also offers solutions that could help religious, professional, and layperson members of color alike. The report acknowledges that there have been some strides made in the last 3 years since the study was undergone, but there's still much to do. As longtime members and friends of the church know well, UU congregations affirm and promote 7 principles. I'm not going to list all of them today, although it would kind of help me make my minimum time allotment. Of course, we are here to share the 8th principle, which Eliza was kind enough to read earlier today, and I think we're going to read again. The 8th principle affirms and promotes journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That sounds nice. You know what? How about we all read that together one more time, with feeling. The 8th principle affirms and promotes journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build this multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our other conditions. Thank you so much. Now here's where things get a little bit into the weeds. At the 2017 General Assembly, or GA, there was discussion about the amendments to some of the existing 7 principles, as well as the addition of the 8th principle. This led to the establishment of the Article 2 Study Commission in the fall of 2020. As many of you may know, but some of you may not, the latter including me until a few months ago, Article 2 consists of the bylaws, principles, and purposes to which the UUA ascribes and the covenant to which congregations and covenant communities pledge to when becoming members of the UUA. With the help of focus groups, individual interviews, and surveys, and after several drafts, the Article 2 Study Commission presented recommendations for a new Article 2 to the Board of Trustees, UUA Board of Trustees this past January. The new Article 2 draws upon shared values embodied in the following image. It is pretty, isn't it? As you can see, love continues to be our core value, with justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity generating out from it. Out of these 6, I believe justice comes the closest to embodying the 8th principle, as it vows that, quote, we work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions. Like I said, it's close. After a 3-month period during which amendments to Article 2 could be offered this past year, several were presented at GA in June. Having reviewed many of them, two amendments stuck out to me as being relevant to the subject at hand. Amendment 68 says, systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We commit to being an association of congregations that empowers and enhances everyone's participation, especially those with historically marginalized communities, or marginalized identities. I like that, it's getting there. Also is Amendment 13, which offers that we covenant dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregation and in society at large. That sounds even better, right? Now, with all of that, there's still going to be a 6-month process where the amendments are refined and sent back to the UUA Board of Trustees for a final vote at the GA in June 2024. In the meantime, I feel there is no reason why we cannot act as a congregation to make changes. Indeed, we can still decide to enact the 8th principle ourselves. In fact, we have wonderful precedent in our own backyard, so to speak, our neighbor congregations in Northwest Philadelphia, some of the members which I acknowledged earlier today. Recently, I spoke to Bruce Pollock Johnson, who was not only an integral part of the process at what was then UU Church of Restoration, now known as Mount Airy. He also happens to be the father of our own Keel Polson. Bruce was one of the 2 original co-authors of the 8th principle back in 2013 and was a major facilitator of a process that resulted in UU of Mount Airy adding the 8th principle into their congregational covenant in May 2017. Just down the road, the Unitarian Society of Germantown, or USG, would adopt the 8th principle themselves in June 2019. So keeping score, that's 2 out of the 3 congregations in the city who have so far adopted the 8th principle. In total, approximately 280 of the 1,000 or so congregations have themselves adopted the 8th principle. So, what can we do as a congregation, you may ask? Well, I believe there are 3 things we can do. 1, our illustrious Board of Trustees can take the necessary steps to formally put the topic of the 8th principle before the congregation. I understand that there has been a discussion of the 8th principle among board members in the past, but that between the pandemic, financial concerns that we are aware of, and other subjects we may not be so aware of, that topic may have been tabled. However, I see advancing discussion of the 8th principle as probably one of the easier wins the board can achieve at this point. 2, I invite all who have the time and energy to join KEO, I, and others in the Winding the Circle discussion group. In fact, there's going to be a Zoom meeting on tentatively scheduled for August 15th at 8 o'clock. So I would invite you to see Keo, who's waving his hand, afterwards, and they'll set you up with more information. And 3rd, naturally, when the time comes that the church has the opportunity to formally adopt the 8th principle, I enthusiastically encourage all of you to say yes. Yes. Thank you. Let's see. So actually, that's the end of my speech.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.